Dave, can you hear me? This is Roger Austin. Just checking my audio. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Roger.
Thanks.
Good morning and welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission's administrative meeting for Wednesday, March 16th, 2022. I'd like to begin today just by recognizing a new hire that we have here at the Commission. His name is Anson Justy. He's a regulatory economist in our electricity division. Anson is a recent graduate from UC Davis, where he received a graduate degree in environmental policy and management. He also received a Bachelor's of Science in economics, as well as applied mathematics and statistics from Macalester College. So we'd just like to welcome Anson to the electricity team under the leadership of Drew McAuliffe. So welcome, Anson. I'd also like to reflect on the fact that today is the 2-year anniversary since this commission and the nation effectively shut down operations and went into effective lockdown with the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. I am particularly proud of the commission's staff over the course of the past 2 years. They have been tremendously resilient. They've adapted to very uncertain times. They were flexible. And because of their commitment and their loyalties to this commission and to the ratepayers of the state, the commission never missed a beat. We were successful in continuing to issue hundreds of orders, protect the traveling public in for-hire vehicles, and ensure that rates and utility services remain just and reasonable. So on behalf of myself and my fellow colleagues, just like to thank all of the commission staff for bearing with us through these very difficult 2 years. It definitely feels like we've changed the corner. And just as a reminder, we will be reopening the commission's hearing room to all in-person public activities effective May 4th in 7 weeks from today. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Did you have minutes to approve?
Oh, thank you. Yes, we do have minutes to approve from our meeting 2 weeks ago, which was March 2nd, 2022. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, there are 7 items on today's consent agenda. Item number 1 is an application from Commercial Utility Consultants, Inc. for a license to supply natural gas. Item number 2 is a notification of change in ownership and name change from BGE Home Products and Services, LLC. Items 3 through 5 are notifications of changes in ownership for Breaker Box, LLC, Constellation New Energy, Inc., and Constellation New Energy Gas Division, LLC. Item number 6 is a request from GSG6 LLC for certification as a renewable energy facility. And finally, item 7 consists of an unbundled network element loop forbearance amendment to an interconnection agreement between Verizon Maryland LLC and Quantum Telecommunications, Inc.
Thank you. We'll begin with questions by the commissioners on these consent agenda items. We'll start with Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for staff on item number 1. Mr. Zhang.
Good morning.
Good morning. I noticed the buck sheet says that since they've been operating in Maryland as an electricity broker, they've had no complaints filed with the Consumer Affairs Division. However, under technical and managerial competency, it lists a bunch of states that they are also operating in. And I'm wondering, did we check with those other states? It wasn't clear to me when I read the buck sheet.
Yes, so staff felt comfortable without checking the other states due to a couple reasons. Firstly, the company has been operating since 2011. Secondly, they're only a broker. It's very rare that we would ever see complaints for a broker in these kinds of terms. And then thirdly, they're only applying to serve commercial and industrial customers as well. So
Yeah, if they were ever sanctioned in another state, I'd like to know that as a commissioner going forward. Just make note of that, please, because I think that's important for the commission to be told by our staff if they have been sanctioned in another state. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. I have a question for item number 2, consent agenda. I believe that's also you, Mr. Zhang.
Yes, that is me as well. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The BGE Home name has a very long history here at the commission. There have been a number of parties that have challenged the use of it by the company, and they've also questioned a lot about how it's been marketed. That history includes a number of pieces of legislation proposed in the General Assembly. So I'm curious now as to if the staff looked at all into how the company is going to continue marketing the Constellation Home Products and Services name. This is my first question, would tie to the use of the phrase in the past. On all of the marketing materials, it would say BGE Home is not BGE, a regulated utility. Are we going to see something similar to that, or is that going away? What do we know?
Staff, I do not believe reviewed that portion of the application. I believe the company is available today, so they may be able to provide some more insight into that.
And I believe we have Florence Davis, Maurice Simpson, and Carrie Kramer with us today, who could perhaps help answer Commissioner Linton's questions.
Yes, hi, this is Florence Davis, and I can answer that question. As you know, as part of the fission of the separation of Constellation from Exelon, we are no longer affiliated with BGE and no longer have any rights to use that name. So the name change is made to Constellation Home Products and Services. We were not intending to include the disclosure saying that we're not affiliated with BGE, the utility, going forward. However, if you think it would be useful and would avoid confusion for customers, we'd be happy to continue doing that. We only used it before because of the potential confusion between BGE Home Products and Services and BGE, the utility.
Okay, well, I certainly wouldn't be the one to say you should continue using it. I think there were quite a few parties that contributed to those discussions to get to that final point. Help me to understand what the transition is going to look like. So are we looking at a particular day in the future when all of the advertising, marketing references to BGE Home just go away and Constellation becomes the new name? Or are we looking at some period of time where there'll be both names will get used?
No, so there is a transition. There was a notice that went to, I'm trying to remember in Maryland, a notice that went to customers to inform them of the name change. That notice was attached to the notice that you received, the notice of the name change that was sent to the commission. And so once the customers are notified, then the name is, all the marketing and everything is changed going forward. And that name change was effective February 1st, I believe.
Okay, so you're not using up all the rest of the BGE Home materials.
No.
You're just getting rid of everything.
No. Yes. Sadly, we do have that bit of waste. We don't continue to use those materials. All new customer contracts, all website, everything gets, was changed. Yes.
Yeah, and vehicles too?
I believe so. I can confirm that. I can confirm that there aren't any others out there. But yeah, there shouldn't be any any customer confusion as between BGE Home Products and Services still being used while Constellation Home Products and Services is still being used.
Okay. Mr. Zhang, what's the staff's response to that, if any?
Pardon me?
What's the staff's response to that? Are you comfortable that the transition would move along appropriately and without causing confusion to consumers?
Yes, that is staff's
Oh,
that is staff's understanding at this time. So as the company indicated in their letter notifying the commission of this change, they also included a copy of their letter that they sent to all their customers that were on, I guess, previously BGE Home. And this letter explained to the customers that the regulated utility portion and the competitive supply portion were being separated. And thus, BGE Home would now be known as Constellation going forward. So I believe the customers have been notified and there should not be at least too much confusion going forward.
okay, so I kind of feel like I'm on one of these game shows now.
I will ask.
We have our webpage here. I don't know if it's visible on the camera, but you can see that the site BG Home is still there. It does have a statement at the top that says Constellation, BG Home is now Constellation Home. But it does not look like anything else has been, I mean, this looks like a fully functioning website. There's even a picture of a van that has BG Home on it.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I will follow up with, I will, that was supposed to have been changed, so I will follow up with the BG Home, with the BG Home folks. I know, as you can imagine, there were a lot of things that changed, beginning of February. And so, we've been focused, well, in a lot of areas, but, we will go back and make sure that that gets changed.
Okay, I mean, there's just for purposes of, and I guess to help out a little bit, you have email contacts, you have social media, BG Home, and this is a lot to unravel. BG Home's been around for many years. So, I'm not sure if there needs to be more looking into this or not, Mr. Chairman.
I'm actually very concerned, Commissioner Linton. It's been, 6 weeks since the transition, and I'm looking at a fully functional BGE Home Facebook page. And as you noted, there's a picture of the van delivering a nice HVAC unit to somebody's beautiful townhome. And notwithstanding the fact that it says BGE Home is now Constellation Home, and I recognize that the website would need to redirect to Constellation Home. There is no redirection. What is the website for Constellation Home?
Let me just go,
It's constellationhome.com.
Okay. So Mr. Simpson, the bghome.com website is not redirecting to Constellation Home, and that's a problem.
No, we totally agree, Mr. Chairman, and to Ms. Davis's point, we will work with our IT folks to see what the timeline is for that transition, or why it hasn't been completed as of yet.
Okay, well, the commission, I see the Constellation Home website, which is totally separate, and it says formerly BG Home. I would suggest that since we're acting on this filing today, that website needs to come down immediately. And then redirect any customers who go to BG Home to Constellation Home. So
Yep.
that's my sense. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Mr. Chairman, I'm inclined to want to hold this and have the appropriate ties severed to bring it back instead of acting on it today. Because I was in the legislature when this came through, as Commissioner Linton suggested. It was very controversial. And there's always been a lot of concern about the cross-pollination of the regulated and non-regulated utility and the affiliate status of these entities. And it looks like it's continuing, and I don't want to be part of that.
Let's hold this item 1 week. Ms. Davis, if you could come back to us in a week and provide us with an update, because it appears that it
Yeah, absolutely.
caught you and your colleagues off guard, but the fact of the matter is that this went into effect, and I recognize that the commission's only action is to note the filing. We really have no authority to do anything else, but having the company or both companies, BG Home, continue to live on concurrently with Constellation Home is something that cannot happen, and it will expose Constellation Home to possible legal exposure for sure. So we'll, Mr. Secretary, we'll hold this item if we could bring it back to the March 30th commission meeting.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Seeing none, with respect to item number 1, I would move that we grant the company a license to operate as a natural gas supplier in Maryland, limited to broker services for the customer classes and service territories applied for and recommended by staff. That we direct the company to provide training materials specific to its Maryland operations to the commission staff 30 days prior to utilization of the materials in Maryland, and direct the company to file notice with the commission within 30 days of any changes to the information in its application. With respects to items number 3, 4, and 5, I move that we note the filing. With respect to item number 6, I move that we approve the application and issue a renewable energy facility ID certification number, and direct the applicant to establish a REC account with PJM GATS within 30 days of certification, and direct the applicant to notify the commission within 30 days if the information on which the application is based should change. And finally, with respect to item number 7, I move that we approve the interconnection agreement amendment 10 days after a 30-day comment period unless adverse comments are filed. The vote begins with Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motions are approved.
Mr. Chairman, item 8 on the administrative agenda consists of revisions to time of use rates from Potomac Electric Power Company. On this item for staff, we have David Hoppick and Annette Garofalo, and for the company, Matt Bonikowski and Matt Seegers.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. David Hoppick on behalf of staff. During the January 20th, 2022 Commission hearing regarding the PC 44 time of use pilot, Pepco committed to filing revisions to its Schedule R TOUP tariff to remove the April 1st, 2022 end date for its TOU pilot tariff. In the instant filing removes the April 1, 22 end date from the tariff, allowing Schedule R TOUP to remain in effect while the Commission determines if and how to continue the R TOUP rates. The filing also allows customers leaving Schedule R TOUP to choose between Schedules R and RPIV if eligible. Staff recommends that the Commission accept the proposed tariff revisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoppick. Counsel for Pepco.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Matthew Seegers appearing for Pepco. Also appearing with me is Mr. Matthew Bonikowski. We have nothing to add to staff's presentation, but we are available if you have any questions.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, I would move that we accept the tariff revisions for filing. The vote begins with Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, items numbers 9 through 12 are electric vehicle semi-annual progress reports from the Potomac Edison Company, Potomac Electric Power Company, and Delmarva Power and Light Company, Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, Inc., and Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. On these items for staff, we have Drew McAuliffe, Annette Garofalo, and Jim Greger. For Potomac Edison, Kevin Miser, Neil Keating, and Jeffrey Trout. For Office of People's Counsel, Fred Hoover. For Pepco and Delmarva, Taylor Beckham, Doug McKeel, Brianne Jordan, Dan O'Connor, William Sullivan, and Stephen Park. For Smeko, Jeff Shaw and Mike Highland. And for BGE, Dan Herson, Christy Fleischman-Gronke, and Joel McHale.
Thank you. If council could turn on their cameras if they are preparing to discuss any of these items, we'll begin with staff.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Mr. McAuliffe on behalf of staff. Staff just wishes to make one brief comment this morning. The utilities who participate in the EV pilot have requested clarification on the applicability of the sales and use tax at utility-owned public EV charging stations. Staff has just received communication from the Controller's Office that indicates that the sales and use tax should be applied to these stations, and staff further agrees with this interpretation. Staff can provide this communication with the utilities, and staff is willing to discuss this further with the utilities because of the late notice that was not provided in our comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McAuliffe. I recall that this was a point of contention with some utilities charging tax and some not. I am glad to hear the Comptroller's Office has provided us with some certainty here. We'll next turn to Office of People's Counsel.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Fred Hoover on behalf of the Office of People's Counsel. We filed a letter in reference to one of the reports, the one by Potomac Edison, and in particular, it was the request by Potomac Edison for an increase in the budget over the amount that was approved as part of the mid-course review in order for them to implement the EV-only time of use rate. As you can see in our letter, we're concerned not only about the amount of money, which is significant, but also the explanations that have been offered by Potomac Edison as to the need for it. But ultimately, we do agree with staff that apparently the money is needed to implement the rate. And while we agree with staff's request that Potomac Edison use its best efforts to try to minimize the amount of increase, we think that the one way to sort of hold their feet to the fire is to actually require Potomac Edison in its next report to explain to the Commission and staff and to us the efforts that they have taken to minimize the extra money needed to implement the time of use rate.
Thank you, Mr. Hoover. We'll start with your comments as a jumping off point. We'll hear from counsel for Potomac Electric first. Potomac Edison, I'm sorry, Potomac Edison, Mr. Trout.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Jeffrey Trout for Potomac Edison. We appreciate the comments filed by staff and those from the Office of People's Counsel as well. It is regrettable that we have to come back and ask for a budget increase on this, but we wanted to be transparent with you as soon as reasonably possible about the need. And we agree that it is our obligation, as it always is, to act in a prudent and reasonable manner. And we will take all reasonable efforts to minimize the costs for this program, this part of the program. And if the Commission would like us to do a write-up in our next report to the Commission where we discuss what steps we've taken to control the expenditures, we are willing and able to do that.
All right. Nobody wanted to tell me that I was on mute for the past minute, but I'll restart again. Mr. Trout, I'm confident that my colleagues would agree with me that we would support and accept your offer to provide that narrative and explanation in your next report, and that should go a long way towards addressing Mr. Hoover's concerns that he just addressed. So we will accept your commitment, and we'll expect to see that in the next report.
Can I just
Mr. Richard? Yeah.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One other point that I think Mr. Hoover raised is, whether or not the company PE has approached First Energy for help and resources or the personnel. And I was kind of curious to hear a direct answer to that, Mr. Trout.
We have, and we are using First Energy resources, and that is going to be part of how we stay within and hopefully come under, but certainly try to stay within the additional budget request. It's my understanding that there are some costs here that we may be just eating, and that may be at the holding company level. And that's already reflected in the figure of the 365. So that point is already reflected, Commissioner.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next three utilities, starting with PHI.
Good morning, Commissioners. Taylor Beckham here on behalf of Potomac Electric Power Company and Delmarva Power and Light Company. There was a long list that was read out, but today I have with me Brianne Jordan and Stephen Park from PHI, and we're available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Beckham. We'll next turn to Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Mike Highland saying hello from beautiful Southern Maryland. I'm joined by Jeff Shaw, and we're available for questions.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell has some questions for you.
So I noticed we were sent maps by our senior technical advisors showing the distribution of EV infrastructure of various types, whether it's residential, L2s, DC fast chargers, multifamily, and the colors changed as the density increased, white being none, and Southern Maryland looks very white on those color-coded maps. Can you explain that to me? Why are we, seems to be going slow in Southern Maryland?
Well, I don't know if we're going slow. I haven't seen the maps, sir. At this time last year, I think it was St. Patty's Day, we had this call. Those Irishmen out there, Sláinte, I wish you health. We had 2 units in. We are only doing the public-facing charger program. And currently we have 23 now. So we've increased that by 21 chargers in the past year. We do not have a residential program, but we do follow the advancement of EVs being purchased. We're at about 2,050 cars, we believe, in our territory. We're using the MDOT and the MVA databases. We also are working with data analytics Oracle to pinpoint where the EVs are. We hope to do a residential rebate program this year and file it with the commission. We're not there yet, but that's hopefully coming. I would say in the years, I've only been at Smeko about 1 year and 6 months. And since that time, we've gone from 0 to 23 on the public out of 60 that we are trying to put in time. And we feel like we're on our goal to make that. We have 4 under construction on top of those 23. So I would need to see the charts to argue one way or another on that data, sir. But right now, I think we actually are moving pretty well.
So how many do you have in Calvert County?
Calvert County, we have 4 that are commissioned. We should commission a 5th one this week at the Calvert Board of Education. And we broke ground at the College of Southern Maryland in Prince Frederick on Monday. And I have a meeting this week with Shannon over at the Parks and Rec to look at the Aquatic Center, Howling Point Park, and Dunkirk Park.
Have you thought about Calvert Cliff State Park? Is that as a destination?
Calvert Cliff State Park is a DNR site. We met with DNR. They are electrifying some of their fleet. So we met with them at 5 state park locations, only 1 in Calvert County, and it was Calvert Cliffs.
And do you believe there's going to be one position there?
Yes, they're going to put one in for their fleet, is what they're looking at right now. They may be putting one out for the public facing. But I'll have to circle back with them. We've given them information on any transformer upgrades, service upgrades they need at the 5 locations.
Yeah, I think one for the public would be good because people come from all over the state and all over the Mid-Atlantic region to come to that park, and I think it would be helpful if we had one there. And we've already approved these chargers going behind lock gates, so at parks. So I think we'd be okay to put one there. I have one more question about St. Mary's County. There's one at a theater in Lexington Park, just outside the naval base. Who owns that theater?
The county owns the property and the theater.
Okay. All right, because it just struck me, because I looked at Newtown Players and I looked at the theater and I didn't see any affiliation with the government. And I knew we had a mandate.
You and I share the same question. When I received the list upon coming to Smeko and chatting with St. Mary's, I was kind of confused until I met with them and confirmed it's actually being used pretty good right now. So we think it's a good spot too.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Finally, we have Baltimore Gas and Electric Company.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Dan Herson for BGE. I want to thank staff for their analysis, Mr. McAuliffe. And it was also brought to our attention that our Appendix A attached to our report, although it's titled July 1st through December 31st, it actually has numbers from January through June of 2021. So I will be filing an errata with the commission shortly that has the correct numbers there. So I apologize for any inconvenience that caused. We don't have any formal presentation, but my colleague, Christy Fleischman-Gronke, who's our manager of strategic programs, and myself are available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Herson. I will have some questions for likely Ms. Gronke, but before we cut to questions, let me see if there's any members of the public or other individuals who wish to speak on any of these EV applications. If so, now is the time. Okay, hearing none. This is for Mr. Herson or Ms. Fleischman-Gronke. You're aware of the comments that Mr. Lanny Hartman filed in this docket, are you?
Yes, we are.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Gronke. Okay,
Good
so
morning.
BG is aware of those concerns. Are you in a position to respond or address some of his concerns today?
Absolutely. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Christy Fleischman-Gronke with BGE. We received a report that Chatamo handle was damaged on January 3rd. We placed the order for a new charging cable on January 7th, and we received the cable to completely replace out that cable and Chatamo connector on February 25th. So there was, several weeks from when it was identified to when we received the replacement cable, just due to all of the supply chain issues that we've been experiencing with broken parts.
Does BG have extra handles and extra cords in the event that another one gets damaged?
We are planning to start to stockpile a few cords. We're working with Greenlots. They sell kits essentially that have most of the common components that are broken, and have a few of those on hand, so we're able to replace some of the more common components in a quicker speed.
Mr. Hartman did not disclose which charger in Annapolis was the problematic one, but
Yeah.
was it the Eastport Library?
Yes, Eastport Library.
And
sorry, I was just going to indicate that during that time, the CCS charger connector cord was operable, so the station remained online. For any drivers that use CCS as opposed to Chatamo, you were still able to use that charging station.
Are you aware of the plug share score for this charger, this bank of chargers?
Yes, this charger has been particularly problematic. The manufacturer of the charging station is FSEC, and we're having direct conversations with them. There's several of their chargers that we've installed throughout the service territory that are more problematic than others. So we're looking to have a more comprehensive conversation with them on the issues that we're seeing on their units.
Is it fair to say that the FSEC chargers, I believe these are Portuguese made, have a higher malfunction rate than other chargers?
That is what we're seeing, unfortunately.
And do we have, this is what, the QC45 model?
Correct.
And I assume BGE, because these are relatively new, has some type of warranty with FSEC?
Yes, we do have a warranty. The problem is getting the parts. So now we're looking to warehouse some of them. So we're able to get the parts through the warranty. It's just the availability of the parts with the supply chain issues. We also stopped purchasing FSEC units probably over a year ago. We've switched to the tritium units, which are the slimmer charging stations that you see out there. So when we started to see the trouble that we were having with the FSEC units, we canceled all orders that we had and moved to a different unit that has been more reliable.
Okay.
But we're still dealing with the ones that were previously installed.
That's that is good to know. I don't believe the commission has been made aware of that. I think across the country, EV drivers have had experience with the FSEC models.
Yes.
And looking at this Annapolis Neck Library in Eastport, your reviews are being torn to shreds by one fellow named David, who as recently as February 20th said, stay away from non-functional stations. And let me ask you this, does somebody at BGE review the PlugShare reviews on a regular, if not daily basis?
Yes, we do review them on a daily basis. We respond to customers, any customer that provides a negative check-in. So that's one of the reasons we were made aware of the broken CHAdeMO connector was through PlugShare as well. So any negative check-in, we respond to those customers and use that as a tool to identify problems and address them promptly.
Does Greenlots have any responsibility here in terms of monitoring reviews or no?
Yes, so there's two really sources that we're using. PlugShare is one, and then if a customer calls the Greenlots 800 number that's listed on the chargers to report a ticket, we're made aware of that immediately as well. And that's for something, if the driver's having problems, but the charger appears online, that's the avenue. When the charger has some sort of faulted status or a problem with an internal component or the charger goes offline, we get pings from the charger every 15 minutes. So we're made aware, within a 15-minute span that the charger is offline. Greenlots does some remote diagnostics. They try, to resolve the problem remotely before we dispatch a crew to address the problem. And we've been working with Greenlots over the past couple of months to improve their remote diagnostics. They've done some technology changes that we're hoping to see the benefits of in the near future of being able to do more to correct the charger problem remotely and then specifically identify the problem so that when we send a crew on site, we can take the likely necessary parts with us so we can correct the issue in one visit versus the multiple visits that we've had to do in the past.
It's really hard to be an EV advocate right now because with the exception of high gas prices, because one of the arguments that I get is that, well, I see more EV charging stations, but I hear about problems with reliability. When you go to a gas station, it's rare that all of the pumps are broken. Maybe you'll have one with a plastic baggie and you avoid that pump. But if you're driving an EV vehicle and you have a CHAdeMO connector, the fact that a CCS connector is working isn't going to do any difference for you. Fair to say EVgo is your largest private competitor in terms of fast charging in the region?
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I mean, just knowing, I think Tesla is probably pretty close up there in number of fast chargers. Electrify America certainly has another decent number of fast chargers in our region. What we're doing, like Tesla, Electrify America, is installing in most all locations at least 2 DC fast chargers. So the likelihood that at least one of them would be operational for drivers to use is much higher than just having the one charger. We have one location, the Eastport Library, and then one in Carroll County where we only have one DC fast charger, but we quickly learned that 2 is necessary at each location to make sure that drivers have an operable charger. And that's what those private companies are doing. And when they report uptime, they're reporting it on a site level. So at least one of the charging stations is operable at that location, then they're quoting 100% uptime.
And they get scores of 10 on plug share for the most part because
Yeah.
of that.
Yes.
And if my colleagues will indulge me, I have a few more questions for Ms. Gronke. Are you aware of this petition that's now circulating on the internet, asking EV Smart to stop installing QC 45 stations, which I believe you said you are not anymore. But do you know about this petition?
Yes, I do.
Okay. More and more EV drivers, and I think I could speak for Commissioner Linton as well, rely on these crowd-sourced shareable apps to find a station. And if I see a station with a score less than 6 or 7, I'm not going to stop because I don't want to waste my time and chance that a charger is non-operational. But taking a look at that station we just referenced in Eastport, that has a 5.0 rating. The Annapolis Library crosstown has a 2.6 rating out of 10. The Gott's Garage, is that a BGE charger at the Gott's Garage downtown Annapolis? It looks
Yes.
like one.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
That one has a rating of 4.1. The Whitmore Garage in Annapolis has a rating of 6.4. I think these scores matter a lot to drivers, and to the extent that they see that the Annapolis Library has a rating of 2.6, that means that a potential customer won't be charging up at that location, which means that BGE will not be seeing that revenue. And at this early stage, I don't expect any of these stations to be turning a profit, although some are getting pretty close, which is impressive. But I hope BGE recognizes, as the leader amongst the 4 utilities that we've heard from today, 5 if you consider Delmarva and Pepco to be separate, some of these recent concerns are troubling. Let me ask you about Mr. Hartman. I think we all remember him. He was standing outside for hours waiting to testify to the commission last fall. If I recall, he was at Howard County Community College, and he pointed out that multiple DC fast chargers were either inoperable or were the output was at a much reduced rate. Can you give us a status update on the Howard Community College chargers?
Absolutely. So there's 2 fast chargers at Howard Community College. One of them completely failed, which was the one that was offline at the time. We had to completely replace that unit. We shipped the broken unit back to FSEC, and they replaced it with a new unit that has been installed, was installed a short time after that hearing. As far as the second unit that had a lower output, we were unaware of that issue until Mr. Hartman raised it. Turned out that when the charger was commissioned, it was set up at a lower output, and once that issue was identified, Greenlots was able to remotely fix that issue same day and checked all of the other DC fast chargers to make sure they were also not commissioned at a lower output than they were supposed to be. And that was the only one.
So those commissions were being throttled right out of the box?
Yes. That for that one charger. It hasn't happened in any other, so it was a user error in commissioning. But that was able to be remotely addressed very quickly.
Okay, well, as I just stated, your team, BG, was a leader sort of out of the gate when we cut the ribbon on this program back in January of 2019. Some of the other utilities, notably PHI, was a little slower out of the box, but they've made great strides over the past 9 months. I hope that BG management is taking these concerns of the EV driving public seriously, to the extent that reliability issues plague some of these chargers. You know better than anybody, the EV community is small. I'm looking at a review now from Miss Elvira Thompson. She's, you know, Elvira, right?
Yes, I do.
Yes. And so she's everybody contributes to this. So BG does need to work on upping the reliability. I recognize we did not improve the $1 million add-on for the green lot service contract, but the utility needs to do whatever it takes, because before we know it, we'll be at the end of the 5-year review, and these considerations will be considered by the commission as to whether or not this program continues on or ends at the conclusion of 5 years. So I have no further questions. But Ms. Gronke, did you have anything to respond before I turn to my colleagues?
I just appreciate your comments. We're definitely working on it. We are working with Green Lots and the manufacturer FSEC to get these problems fixed. It's our top priority. We're also participating in the PSE work group to determine the reliability standards. We have been reporting a very conservative number in our reliability metrics. We count unknown status, which is when the charger loses cellular connectivity, but is also often able to dispense a charge. If we consider unknown status, which I believe the other Maryland utilities are, then the uptime is 98.5%. But notwithstanding all of these issues that we've seen at particularly the FSEC units that we're working hard to resolve, and hope we can report vast improvements by the next semi-annual report.
Thank you, Ms. Fleshman-Gronke. Commissioner Richard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And please, Ms. Gronke, this is not meant to be a pile on, but I just, after very thorough questioning of the chairman, I did want to just ask a little more about what the plans going forward. Now, largely, as a leader, you've probably faced some of the toughest issues with the network as you're building it out. But they are challenges, and we certainly want Marylanders, Maryland EV drivers, to have a good experience, and of course the ratepayers feel like that they're getting a good value for this program. It was noted you still have a number of installations to go before you reach the 500. Have you considered slowing that down a little bit? I think you're at 176 now. We certainly want to see the build out, but slowing that down to a certain extent until you get a handle on some of these reliability issues that you're facing, and again, making sure that you do have the parts, because right now you seem to be indicating to the commission through this report that you won't stockpile these reports unless you get more money. But then we have the problem of reliability. So it sounds like you need to get your program a little better fine-tuned before you rush forward any, more to get the 500 number. So could you just comment on that a little bit? Is this necessary for BG to slow it down just a little bit to get your arms around the fact that your reliability is lagging now the other utilities?
Yes, great question. Thank you. We have installed, so as we've mentioned in other semi-annual report outs, that the DC fast chargers were, most popular with the site host, that, people were looking for the fast charge. So we have installed most of our DC fast chargers that were approved to install through the program. So the remaining bulk of our chargers are really level 2 stations, which we've had very minimal issues with. And as I indicated before, the main issues that we're seeing is with the FSEC units, and we have stopped installing those. We're installing now the tritium units, and we've also purchased some BTC units, which are the same manufacturer as our level 2 stations. So we don't anticipate seeing the problems that we are currently working on with the stations that have already been installed. And with the majority of our new sites that are under construction being level 2 only, we don't anticipate, that should improve our reliability as a whole with those stations online, 99% of the time. If you look at our reliability numbers breaking out level 2 versus DC, our level 2 uptime is over 99%.
Okay, well, thank you for that, and that is encouraging to hear. But again, I think it's most important in this pilot that the EV driver have a good experience, and that at the same time, at least hard for me as a commissioner to want to approve more money if BGE is not willing to make sure that they live up to their promises, and they also deliver the reliability. And if it takes more parts in inventory to keep reliability, I would hope that the BGE would step up and make sure that happens.
Yes, yeah, we're definitely working on staffing or stockpiling some of these issues, remaining within budget, but stockpiling anything and everything we can to make sure we can resolve the issues quickly.
Okay, well, I heard a promise that you could do both, so I hope that's the case. But again, it's encouraging to see BG as a leader, and I think it hopefully will reflect well on Maryland as well. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment, and then I have a question for the other utilities. But Ms. Cronky, I recall our discussion of the proposal for multifamily dwelling unit installations. The company was proposing to be within 1 mile of a multifamily dwelling unit. The commission didn't approve that. Well, I had a discussion, if I recall correctly, with you about the DC fast charge or the chargers installed by Giant in Lusby, the thriving metropolis of downtown Lusby. And I think you had told me they were likely L2 chargers, but I've since confirmed they're not. They're DC fast chargers, or at least that's what I'm told. And I just wanted to correct that part of the record from a previous discussion. They are indeed DC fast chargers, and Giant took on the responsibility to put them in their parking lot themselves. So
That's great.
Just wanted to let you know.
Thank you.
To the other utilities, is anybody else using these FSEC QC45 problematic charging stations for their installations?
This is Stephen Park from Pepco or the PHI. So we are using the the FSEC QC45 units. We have actually started using them for our workplace charging way back. Fortunately for us, we haven't seen those issues that BG&E has faced with the QC45 yet. And we have a number of them in our storage room that we're going to utilize. But other than that, we had some other issue with FSEC where some of the delivery for the recent orders hasn't been fulfilled. So we are actually switching them to BTC Power as our supplier for DCFC going forward. But other than that, yeah, we're monitoring closely the performance of QC45s. We haven't had much issues with them yet.
Okay, Potomac Edison.
Hi, this is Neil Keating with Potomac Edison. We are not using FSEC units. All our units are charge point.
Smeko.
Smeko has decided to use the BTC power units. We are not using any of the FSEC.
Okay. So to the PHI companies, if you do develop problems with these, if you could make that known to the commission, it would be appreciated.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any additional questions on items 9 through 12? Commissioner Richard and then Linton. Commissioner Linton, you haven't had a chance yet. You want to go first?
Well, mine is pretty quick. I've asked you before. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. Good morning, everyone. I had a question for BG regarding the public charging stations. I just wanted to know if there's been any improvement for stations being made available in the Baltimore City and Baltimore County areas.
Yes, we have definitely made improvements in moving forward. Baltimore City has been particularly very active. We have a total of 97 charging stations in progress in Baltimore City and 74 in Baltimore County. We're still working with Baltimore County to identify additional locations, but major improvements in both areas.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for that information. I did have one extra question. I believe it was for Potomac Edison. You had some challenges with, and the staff expressed some concerns regarding the charging time for your time of use customers. Specifically that the customers didn't appear to be taking advantage of the time of use rate because they weren't charging it during the right time frame, but it might have been improving a little bit. I was just curious to know if you had been adapting your marketing and educational information to let customers know, those who have electric vehicles, to let them know that there's some financial benefit at least to modifying their charging cycles.
Good morning, Neil Keating with Potomac Edison. We have put measures in place to encourage folks to schedule their charges. We have not, during the reporting period, changed our customer education and outreach activities around encouraging that use. Just to share, when looking at those numbers, I think we're learning as part of the pilot here that maybe a more strong program with more penalties to discourage use on kilowatt hour use on peak might be beneficial here. And so we look forward to getting our EV only time of use rate going.
Okay. All right, thank you. I do appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This probably is these are questions for Mr. McAuliffe. I was interested in a few points in your report. First, on just the utilization rate of the utility-owned infrastructure. Do you have any sense of how we compare it to the for-profit units? I mean, are they comparable, or are we? You know, is there a way to go to keep up with or like catch up? Maybe is the right word with the for-profits.
Yeah, that's a great question, Commissioner Richard. We don't have access to charging rates at say, for example, Tesla charges or EVgo charges the usage rates. I think they're pretty sensitive about providing that kind of data. But as you noted, we are seeing an uptick in charging station usage really across utilities. You know, I think that's probably two factors really, is the increased adoption of EVs and this, as well as we kind of came out of the pandemic here, obviously, and folks are driving a bit more kind of back to pre-pandemic levels. So yeah, I just wanted to note that we are starting, it's encouraging to see, you know, further usage. And I think as the chairman noted, some are actually reaching profitability in some quarters as well.
Yeah, no, I was very encouraged by that as well. I just wanted to you know, I think it'll probably be an important metric as we get to the end of the pilot to understand how the utility-owned machines are stacking up with the private sector. So to the extent we can probably work with some of the members of the private sector, I guess, the industry. I mean, we were encouraged by the broader sector to engage in this pilot. It would be good if we could get some kind of information to again be able to have some measure on how this the utility facilities are functioning.
Yeah, and just to I apologize if I could just respond to that a little bit. We have received charging data previously from some of these companies, you know, load usage data. So they may be willing to provide us with some of that. It may be some confidential data, but we can definitely reach out to them. We do have some context there. But just, you know, just to point out, you know, for example, a Tesla charging station in Los Angeles County, I'm sure has literally hundreds of uses a day. So, you know, it's pretty, you know, and I think the highest for our utilities was 3 or 4, you know, charges a day. So there's quite a difference there.
Okay. Are most of the utility chargers, are they part of a network of some kind? In other words, you know, like Ford Blue Oval, or I mean, can they be found easily by some of the crowdsourcing and the other apps that help EV drivers locate charging facilities?
Yeah, yes, they can. The utilities can speak to this better than I can, but yeah, you know, I believe all the Exelon utilities use green lots, and Potomac Edison's using Energy Hub. They provide their data, and as the chairman noted, PlugShare, I believe, has all of these chargers located on their app, and I would say PlugShare is probably the main app folks use to find EV charging stations. So yeah, they are visible to EV drivers, I would say.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. And from the chairman's questioning, we heard some of the challenges, perhaps for the utility owned infrastructure, and that is with ratings and that type of thing. But as far as choosing locations, has that been identified as a specific problem with the utility network? And I ask that because I just, again, this is just anecdotal. Near where I lived in Fort Washington, I see the Tanger outlet, and those chargers seem to be very well used. always cars parked there and being charged. But just down the road a little ways, there's a utility-owned facility, a Pepco facility, and at least when I drive by, it does not seem to be used as much. So I'm just interested to know if any kind of that data is coming in on that on location, if that has been a specific challenge.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I would probably say the utilities are at a slight disadvantage. They were required to install on government property, and the commission and staff really wanted them to equitably displace the chargers as well, and not just put them in right next to I-95 or 495 or wherever else in those more busy corridors. So I would say their chargers are at a slight disadvantage, being more geographically diverse and trying to reach all Marylanders.
Okay, in this case, it's a park and ride, and it's maybe they're too close. Again, maybe it's just again for the final report, we try to understand what some of the challenges are with location. And I guess the other area is on the home chargers. Like you, I do have some concerns that it's the program, the pilot as it's currently constituted, is not incentivizing people to charge off peak. Is this being looked at by the work group? And is I guess education money or advertising money going in to try to change that situation? I know you talk about the Weave Grid as one of the areas to try to expand into the time of use and those incentives. But what is being looked at right now to try to make this part of the program, the pilot, a success? Because if we don't change behavior, I kind of have a hard time seeing that this as something as a success for this pilot.
Sure. Yeah. So in regards to PE, as Mr. Keating noted, he was speculating maybe there needs to be a little more punitive measures if there's charging on peak. So for example, PE's off-bill credit is a pure reward system. So that was one of the reasons why staff wanted that rate removed for a more pure time of use rate, because it's pure reward system. So there really is no incentive not to charge on peak. And I guess I would push back a little bit and say we are seeing customers respond, maybe not as quite as vigorously as we would like. But I think, for example, for like the BGE EV only time of use rate, I believe we're seeing charging rates in the off-peak range of at least 80 to 90%. So I'd say that is encouraging. Staff has kind of focused on the initial charging time at the various utilities has always been concerning. So that was the issue we brought up with PE, was that residential customers on average were starting their charging at 3:30 in the afternoon, which obviously is on peak and is concerning. So that was our concern, was we were incentivizing smart chargers and the drivers were not taking advantage of the technology of the smart charger. They were simply just plugging in and charging immediately, instead of plugging in and programming the charger not to charge until 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And staff has asked in DRs, what kind of pamphlets or emails or educational materials are you providing to educate customers on the benefits of charging off peak. And I believe they're providing the correct information. It's frankly hard to incentivize folks to do this all the time. I'm on the BGE EV only time of use rate myself. I do get emails every week about your charging, so that is helpful. It says how much you charged off peak. It's beneficial to the grid to charge off peak. The grid is typically cleaner off peak, so they are trying to nudge people in the appropriate direction. But I would say for the EV only time of use rates, we are seeing charging habits we would like to see.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I'm also encouraged by at least the trends in the data. But as you pointed out in your reports, I share your concerns that maybe we're not moving quick enough in this area. So, to the extent we can, this was an important thrust of the pilot, is to manage charging. So I would hope that all of the participants in the pilot will continue to focus on this, so that this big investment we've made in these smart chargers will bear some fruit. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. At this point, I will call a motion on items number 9 through 12. With respect to item number 9, I move that we note the filing and accept Potomac Edison Company's proposed budget increase for its electric vehicle only time of use rate. And with respect to items number 10, 11, and 12, I move that we note the filing. The vote begins with Commissioner Linton. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard?
Aye.
I vote aye. The motions are approved.
Mr. Chairman, items number 13 and 14 are both from Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, Inc. They consist of revisions to empower Maryland energy efficiency and demand response program tariffs and updated and expanded information for the cooperative smart home pilot program. On this item for staff, we have Paige Shaw and Jim Greger, and for the cooperative, Jennifer Rayleigh, Eugene Bradford, and Jeff Shaw.
Thank you. Good morning to our staff, Mr. Greger and Ms. Shaw.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Paige Shaw on behalf of staff. I'm going to discuss these in opposite order. Item 14 is a filing by Smeko for a smart home pilot proposal as part of its Empower Maryland 2021 to 2023 program cycle. This proposal expands on the smart home pilot proposed by Smeko in September of 2020 and after that, the Commission, as directed by the Commission in order number 89679. The order also directed Smeko to file related tariffs for the Commission's consideration, which is included in item 13. In its original proposal, Smeko proposed using time of use for its smart home pilot, but has since moved away from that idea. The smart home pilot would be similar to the cooperative's current DR programs, but will run all year long rather than only in the summer months. Smeko will be looking to adjust smart thermostats for smaller intervals as well, such as 30 minutes rather than the 2 to 4 hour events. These events will happen in the background at different times of the day for different participants based on what Smeko learns about the participants' usage using AMI data, weather forecasts, energy pricing, and other factors. Staff supports the proposed pilot as it meets the criteria of a proposed pilot program as outlined by the Commission. Staff is also interested in the results of the pilot, the use of AMI data, the individuality of the events, and the possibility of opening the program to include other compatible devices in the future. Item 13 is another filing by Smeko for updated tariff pages related to its Empower Energy Efficiency and Demand Response program. The cooperative updated the language in Rider EMC to include the My Energy Target program, Schools and Education program, and Energy Perks pilot, which were all approved in order number 89679. For the DR program tariffs, the cooperative is renaming several of its DR riders, as well as adding riders for the Bring Your Own Device program, which was approved in order number 89855, and the Smart Home pilot, as previously mentioned. Staff notes the proposed revisions or additions do not have any impact on the Empower Maryland surcharge, but are designed to clarify the tariff language. Staff recommends the Commission approve Smeko Smart Home pilot and accept for filing the cooperative's proposed revisions to its EE and DR program tariffs. And staff is available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. Do commissioners have questions on 13 and 14?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Smeko.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Counsel for Smeko, Mr. Bradford.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is Eugene Bradford. I am not a counsel attorney. I'm Smeko's VP for rates and energy procurement, and Jennifer Riley and Jeff Shaw and I are available for questions.
Terrific. Thank you. I didn't see Mr. McDougall's face on the screen this morning, and I lost track of things. Okay, well, we'll kick it off with questioning from Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure who's going to answer this, Mr. Bradford, Ms. Rayleigh, or Mr. Shaw. And it's only tangentially related. So Smeko recently raised their standard offer rates. What kind of complaints has the utility been receiving? Because I'm hearing it, they're burning my ears up down home. What do you hear?
We have been getting complaints from members. I do not know the numbers on how many we have seen, but we certainly have been getting them from our members, and yeah, we certainly respond and you know, basically get back to the members about their concern.
Yeah, I just received my bill that will be due the beginning of next month, and there were some inserts in there. There was an Empower Maryland insert in there, and then there was a newsletter, kind of 6-point newsletter that you send out periodically, and I received that. And I think the first item was about the rate increase, and the lead line is the Public Service Commission of Maryland approved our rate increase. Now, that's correct. It's accurate, but the lead line almost makes it to the unschooled observer who thinks the Public Service Commission is the state's version of the Peace Corps. It almost looks like we forced you to raise your rates, because then you come right back with, we don't really like to raise our rates, but and so I just wanted to mention that it almost points at the Public Service Commission right out the gate, and I don't know. You got any comment on that?
Certainly understand what your point is on that, and we'll certainly be aware of that and future information out to members.
All right, fair enough. Point given, point received. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any additional questions on these items? Seeing none, I would move that with respect to item number 13, that we except for filing the Cooperatives Empower Maryland Energy Efficiency and Demand Response Program tariff revisions, and with respect to item number 14, that we approve the Cooperative Smart Home Pilot. The vote begins with Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motions are approved.
Mr. Chairman, item number 15 is a request from Cherrywood Solar One LLC to extend construction and operational deadlines. For this item, for staff, we have Roger Austin and Kenneth Albert. For the company, David Bugelmans, Jennifer Field, James King, and Heath Barefoot. And for the State of Maryland Power Plant Research Program, Steve Tulson and Frederick Kelly.
Thank you. Good morning, staff.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Roger Austin on behalf of staff. On April 16th, 2019, the Commission issued an order granting Cherrywood Solar One LLC, a CPCN, to construct a 202 megawatt solar power generating facility. One of the conditions proposed by the Maryland Department of Natural Resources Power Plant Research Program, PPRP, and adopted in the Commission's order stipulated that construction and operation of the project must commence within 3 years of receiving the CPCN and must be completed for operation not later than 4 years after receiving the CPCN. If the project is not completed and operational within 4 years of the issuance of the final order, the CPCN shall expire and no longer constitute authorization to construct and operate the project. On February 15th, 2022, Cherrywood Solar filed a written request with the Commission asking for a 3-year extension of the construction and operational deadlines proposed by PPRP as part of its licensing conditions. In its written request, the company claimed that it is unable to meet its deadlines due to delays in the PJM interconnection review process. While staff acknowledges the delays in the PJM interconnection review process, staff believes that Cherrywood Solar has also contributed to delays in the project. The PJM interconnection review process was completed in June 2021, approximately 10 months prior to the CPCN requirement that construction begin by April 16th, 2022. During those 10 months, Cherrywood Solar spent 3 months reviewing the facility study report before signing an interconnection service agreement. Approximately 10 weeks after signing the interconnection service agreement, Cherrywood Solar then chose to suspend the project. At no time since the completion of the PJM interconnection review process in June 2021, did Cherrywood Solar attempt to complete the local review process with Caroline County and obtain the local permits necessary to begin construction. It is for these reasons that staff concludes that Cherrywood Solar's inability to meet its CPCN construction and operation deadlines stem from both its own delays in addition to delays in the PJM interconnection review process. Nevertheless, staff believes that there is good cause for granting Cherrywood Solar the 3-year extension on the original construction and operational deadlines that it requests. With the enactment of the Clean Energy Jobs Act in May 2019, the state now has an aggressive target of 14.5% of Maryland's energy to be generated by solar resources by 2030. If built, Cherrywood Solar would contribute a not insignificant 202 megawatts towards the state's goal. On Friday, March 11th, PPRP filed a letter stating that it supported granting Cherrywood Solar its requested extensions. In addition to updating the expiration dates in Condition 3, PPRP identified revisions to the conditions that they had initially placed on the CPCN. PPRP believes that these revisions are necessary and warranted to align with current practices in solar cases. As such, PPRP submitted revised CPCN conditions pertaining to construction dewatering, grading and stormwater management, decommissioning, spill control, land use, construction traffic, visual glare, and emergency preparedness. Since PPRP's letter was filed after staff submitted its buck sheet, the wording in staff's recommendations changes slightly to read, staff recommends that the commission grant the company's request for a 3-year extension of the construction and operational deadlines outlined within its approved CPCN for good cause, subject to the new conditions proposed by PPRP. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. We'll turn to counsel for PPRP.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Steve Tolson, counsel for PPRP, and with me is Fred Kelly, who's the project manager now for Cherrywood Solar. I believe Mr. Kelly wants to make one correction to the record on the filing that we made on March 11th, but other than that, I don't believe there are prepared remarks or other things. So I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Kelly.
Good morning, Commissioners. The letter that we filed on March 11th, there was a footnote included, footnote 1. It makes reference to newly revised conditions dated March 3rd, 2022. I'd revised those just before filing, so that March 3rd date should actually be March 11th, the date that it was filed. And I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. I regret to say I don't have your letter in front of me, but aside from that change, you otherwise support the extension? Is that the position?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we'll turn to counsel for the developer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. David Beaglemans on behalf of Cherrywood Solar 1 LLC. I have with me from NextEra, the owner of the project, Mr. Jim King, Ms. Jennifer Field, and Mr. Heath Barefoot. We do appreciate staff and PPRP support on this request. As Mr. Tolson noted and Mr. Austin noted, Cherrywood did work with PPRP and its revised conditions and supports their adoption by the Commission at today's meeting. I would like to take a moment to address staff's comments with respect to whether the project contributed to the need for an extension. I think one important thing, at least with respect to the timing here, with when these agreements were completed and at the date of this hearing, is that the project did work with PPRP before we filed the request to update the conditions. That's something that typically hasn't been done before. We thought it would be more efficient to get that work done before we filed the request. Everything could be handled at a single hearing. In terms of the project advancing after those agreements were signed, the project has taken concrete steps. In order to execute the agreements, it did have to place security of about $3 million. The project's expended capital to extend land agreements for its options for project parcels, and it has now been exploring commercial agreements for offtake. As we said in our filing, this is factually analogous to the extension requests granted to the Jones Farm, Egypt Road, and Brick Kiln projects. This really is just a matter of timing here. The reality is that all four of these projects face similar delays, with PJM and DPL's review taking longer than anticipated. The difference is for those other projects, we were anticipating the return of agreements a quarter after we filed the request. This one, this developer was able to get those agreements prior to filing the request. But the reality is all three of these were in limbo for effectively 3 years. So, we have the full team here to answer any questions from the bench. And thank you for your consideration today. I think you may be muted, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bilgemans. I was twice today. I didn't have my Senka. Every morning, our communications director does a great job. She provides us with news clips regarding any changes in the industry. And one that caught my eye this morning had the title, "Want More Solar Panels? Good Luck Connecting to the Grid." And the subtitle was that developers from New England to California say grid connection problems are an often overlooked issue that are strangling new community solar projects, along with other renewable projects. And I recognize the difficulty. We're bearing witness to what's going on with the PJM interconnection queue reform process as of now, with a potential 2-year freeze as they transition and clear out the backlog. As you noted, we did approve this project back in 2019. Staff, however, you heard Mr. Austin, and it's reflected in his buck sheet, states that the developer here, Cherrywood Solar 1, has some unclean hands, that they contributed to some of this delay, notwithstanding the issues with PJM. How do you respond directly to that? Do you admit or acknowledge that there was some delay on your end, or not?
This is Jim King. I'll try to answer that. I recognize staff's points. I think one of the big things that has to be pointed out is not only the timing of the interconnection information, but there were great fluctuations in terms of the costs that we were given. So the initial estimate in 2017 was about 6.5 million. The next one in 2020 increased by over $10 million before finally coming back down to 3 million. And that affected the feasibility of the project. And we really needed to ensure the scope and cost of the interconnections before we could move forward. As was mentioned, we tried to extend our land agreements, find an off-taker in the interim. We also reached out to Caroline County Board of Zoning in 2021 to see if we needed to extend our special use exemption. So while staff's points are well taken, I don't believe the impression that we have sat idly by would be accurate.
Mr. King, just so that I'm clear, the price tags you associated, those were for network upgrades?
Correct. Our responsibility under the facilities agreements. Yes.
Okay. And just so that I have your numbers correct, it went from 6.5 million to 16 million down to 3 million?
Yeah, it was without giving I don't know if I'm allowed to give the total number for what it went to, but it was more than $10 million and then back down to 3 million.
Okay, more than 10 million. Okay. Thank you. I'll turn to my colleagues. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's see where to start. Let me start with Mr. Bugle. No, let me start with Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly, why do we have construction deadlines and operational deadlines associated with the CPCNs for these types of facilities?
The construction deadlines, I think we just wanted to pose a reasonable time limit by which they would start construction and complete it. And this is based on our understanding of these sorts of projects. In that time, our understanding may evolve, as is the case here, where we've updated a number of conditions. So we don't like these things to be open-ended, such that there may be substantive changes to how a project may impact environmental socioeconomic circumstances. So we'd like to have something in there that provides an end, a date by which the project should be constructed.
Isn't part of the consideration of that the changes that may have occurred to the grid itself and the capacity of the grid in the interim? Because time proceeds, things, loads, stuff changes on the grid out there. And you don't want to open
Our
ended.
concern is primarily the conditions with respect to environmental socioeconomic impacts. I think staff is interested in the interconnection aspects of it, as we are as well. So I do believe that factors in here, and that has been the case based on the testimony here of the applicant.
So common sense tells me that there's a shelf life to these interconnection studies. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are 3 studies and they're done sequentially at PJM. Let me turn to Mr. Bugelman's. Mr. Bugelman's, those studies are complete. Those 3 studies are complete, right?
They are, Your Honor, correct.
Right. So you don't have to do them again. Why do you need the whole 3 years?
The 3 years is, there's a couple of reasons. The commission in the past has granted 3-year extensions. I think Mr. King and Mr. Barefoot could chime in on timing, but I do think it is targeted roughly to provide enough time, obviously, to allow construction to commence and complete within the extension time frame. So, these are complicated projects. The ministerial reviews at the county level are technical. This is a very large project. So I think it is appropriate in this case, Your Honor.
Well,
I would just add, it also gives us the opportunity to update our biological surveys, the raptor surveys, and other things to make sure nothing has changed from an environmental perspective.
I suspect it's because your financing isn't arranged. That's what I suspect, but we use all these other excuses. So let me just say, why didn't you approach the locals, Mr. Bugelmans, from June 2021 to February of this year? Why no progress there?
Well, Your Honor, we had to file for this extension respectfully. And again, in the interim, we did work with PPRP.
You're not answering hang on, Mr. Bugelmans. You're not answering my question. Why didn't you apply to the county from June of last year when you got the interconnection agreement signed? Why didn't you start to make progress?
The project is attempting to make progress.
No, between June and February, why didn't you attempt to approach the locals?
The project hasn't been able to secure commercial offtake, and then once that happens, right, then they can make the investment to begin that work. One thing to keep in mind is that the final engineering commissioner for the submittal, right, for the site plan, for sediment erosion control, and for stormwater, that's upwards or probably more than $1 million for a project of this size. So unfortunately, things are fairly sequential. Again, the project is moving forward on that piece, but without that, that's the holdup. And then there is this issue that we're here today having a hearing on, which is this critical element, which is this deadline. So we're trying to progress it, Your Honor.
Well, I still don't have a clear answer as why you need, as if you're starting from the beginning, you need 3 years to start construction. I don't get it. You don't need to start from the beginning. You already have your interconnection agreement studies, your facilities agreement, the whole 9 yards. That should lop off a bunch of this time and help the state meet its goals, as you promised to do, as you've accepted the responsibility to do. And you're not. And I don't get a clear answer as to why not. Could you comment on that? Why do you need the whole 3 years? You're not starting from the beginning.
That is correct, Your Honor. The project is not starting from the beginning. Again, it's consistent with previous extensions granted to these projects.
Well, hang on. Staff points out there are significant differences, material differences between those others that you're citing and this one. Significant, staff's words.
Respectfully, Your Honor, the differences are not significant compared to the previous 3 extensions that I mentioned. It really is a matter of several months difference between the timing of when these agreements were returned. But again, all 4 of these projects have been effectively in this state of limbo as the interconnection process took significantly longer than anticipated. So I respectfully disagree with staff's position on that. I think this is very, very similar to the other cases we've seen for projects recently on the Eastern Shore.
Mr. Bielgemans, I understand what you're saying, but Commissioner O'Donnell, as I understand what he's saying, is that you're not starting from scratch. A lot of the pain and delays that have occurred are now in the rearview mirror. You have your IA in hand. So the situation now is very different than the situation back in 2019 when you first applied with the commission. So do you really need 3 years? Would 2 years be more than enough since you already have a number of approvals in hand already? Or do you really need the full 3 years as if this was starting from square one? I guess I did not hear a clear
I can
answer.
see if Mr. Barefoot has any comment on that. I know that in terms of perhaps, without speaking for him, supply and the timing that it takes to do the final engineering report and, set up, as was pointed out, financing for the project. But Mr. Barefoot, I don't know if you have something to add on the timing.
That's correct. I mean, you get through all the final site plan approvals to update any environmental reviews necessary prior to the start of construction, and then just the complexity of building a project of this size, which likely will take potentially up to 2 years. We would envision needing the entirety of the 3-year extension.
I do find that somewhat hard to believe, since there had to have been some planning going on over the past 3 years while you were waiting in the queue to get your approvals from PJM. In light of state goals and the fact that there's no opposition from the 2 state agencies before the commission today, I will grant the request somewhat begrudgingly, but I am concerned that an entire brand new start clock with 36 months, it does seem excessive in light of the fact that the developer has had already 36 months to do a lot of the planning, and maybe I just don't understand the complexities of developing a large solar facility. Do my colleagues have any additional questions? Seeing none, I will call a motion that we grant Cherrywood Solar 1 LLC's request for a 3-year extension of the construction and operational deadlines outlined within its approved certificate of public convenience and necessity for good cause.
Subject
to the conditions submitted by PPRP on March 11, 2022, which we now have in front of us. It wasn't here a minute ago, but it's here now. So based on that motion, I'll start the vote with Commissioner Linton.
Mr. Chairman, I would vote aye, but I also share the concerns that Commissioner O'Donnell has raised. And I think the state's, as the staff characterize it, aggressive goals are specifically the reason why we want to make sure that projects like this one, once granted CPCNs, move forward expeditiously. And if they are not going to move forward, it's better for us to know that earlier rather than later as we get closer to that goal date. But based on the representations by PPRP and staff, I'll vote aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to vote no, and I'm going to explain my vote. A lot of this work has been done, And I don't see why there needs to be another 3-year period to start construction. To me, that seems excessive. It doesn't help the state meet its goals. And these developers are in here constantly as if we rubber stamp these extensions on a regular basis. I think no progress being made for local permitting between June of 2021 and the 10 months following is to me evidence of a lack of good faith. So for all those reasons, I'm going to vote no.
Mr. Richard.
And I vote aye. I do note what Commissioner Linton just said, and I think he's made some good points. But for me, I think this state policy is it's extremely urgent that we get these projects developed. This developer has put a lot of time and resources already into this, a lot of capital expenditures. So I vote in favor of the extension.
And noting the statement that I made, I vote aye. The motion is approved. The final item, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, item number 16 consists of comments on the effect of the community choice aggregation pilot on the standard offer service bid process. For this item for staff, we have David Hoppick and Lloyd Spivak. For Potomac Edison, Robert Reaping and Jeffrey Trout. For BGE, Beverly Sakura and David Bloom, and Taylor Beckham. And for Pepco and Delmarva, Dan Tudor and Diana Novak.
Yeah. Good morning. We'll begin with staff.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak on behalf of staff. On January 7th, 2022, the Commission issued a request for comments regarding the impact the Montgomery County Community Choice Pilot may have on standard offer service procurement and any changes necessary to accommodate the pilot program. As noted in the request for comments, the Community Choice Pilot Working Group leader informed the Commission that the transition to or from SOS to the Community Choice Pilot will occur no earlier than October 1st, 2024. As stated in our comments, staff requested that Potomac Edison prepare a revised bid plan that reduces the length of select forthcoming SOS bid blocks to be bid in April and June of 2022 from 24 to 12 months, which avoids bidding any blocks extending past October 1st, 2024. Staff submitted this revised bid plan to the SOS Procurement Improvements Process, or PIP, and received no objections. Staff requests the Commission approve the revised Potomac Edison bid plan. To address the potential risk to SOS suppliers after 2021-2022 bid cycle, staff will convene the SOS Procurement Improvement Process this spring. Staff request the Commission direct us to address in the 2022 procurement improvement process how to mitigate the risk to SOS wholesale suppliers offering supply as the Montgomery County Community Choice Aggregation Pilot begins to serve load and going forward, and how to minimize potential negative impacts to customers who remain on standard offer service both within and outside Montgomery County.
Thank you, Mr. Spivak. Counsel for Potomac Edison.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Jeffrey Trout, Robert Reaping, our expert in this matter, is here with me as well. We support staff's recommendation. We believe the short-term changes to the immediate bid cycle avoids any potential negative impact on standard offer service from the ultimate adoption of a CCA in Montgomery County. And we look forward to working with staff and all the other stakeholders over the course of the next several months to develop a long-term plan to minimize or avoid any impacts in the long term.
Thank you, Mr. Trout. Counsel for PHI. Or Exelon. Ms. Beckham.
Good morning again, Commissioners. This is Taylor Beckham on behalf of PHI, Potomac Electric Power Company, and Delmarva Power and Light Company. As stated in our Oh, before I go into that, I also have with me Dan Tudor and Diana Novak, who are experts in this matter. We agree with PE's position on the proposed bid plan and are available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Beckham. This is obviously going to be a very complicated and heavy lift for the utilities, our staff, our public utility law judge, Jennifer Grace, who is helping to manage this process over the coming years. I believe the proposal before us to start this PIP process early and start addressing these issues can only result in benefits. So I am supportive of the plan. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I would move that we approve the revised Potomac Edison 2021 and to 2022 bid plan and direct staff to initiate the 2022 procurement improvement plan beginning in April 2022 to begin to address issues of number one, how to mitigate risks for wholesale bidders offering electricity supply in the period prior to the beginning of the Montgomery County Community Choice Aggregation Pilot, and then address number two, how to minimize any possible negative effects of the Community Choice Aggregation Pilot on customers remaining on SOS service both within and outside of Montgomery County, Maryland. The vote begins with Commissioner Lincoln.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved with no additional business on the commission's agenda for today. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Commissioners.
Chairman, Commissioners.
Thank you, commissioners.